So I'm going to do a little review on this 2019 Buick Encore, and we rented this car looking for a lot of space in it, and it didn't really have a lot as far as the back of the car goes. In fact, the Nissan Rogue had a lot more space, even though I really don't like a lot of the features from the Rogue. I'd much rather have the space that was in that car than what was in this. But a lot of people are thinking that because this has the 1.4 engine that's also in the Cruise, that it's going to get amazing gas mileage. The truth is, it doesn't really get amazing gas mileage, and it's because it's an SUV. So if you don't need an SUV, you might want to take a look at the Cruise. A lot of people are just buying SUVs because they're cooler, because that's what the look they want or whatever. But you're paying for it pretty dearly in gas mileage. So, because it has the same drivetrain that's in the Cruise. So if you take a look here, we did a trip right now. I reset this at about around 1,000 miles in of where we started. So I'm at about 7,800 miles roughly on this car in a rental in 3 weeks. So we really put the miles on this car, really got to use it. And if you look at my average MPG, it's not very good. 25.6 miles a gallon. Usually on the Cruise, on the other car, doing the same trip, I was at about 29 miles a gallon in the Nissan Rogue. Now, I'm not really a big fan of the Rogue because it has the CVT transmission, and a lot of the Nissan cars are not, in my opinion, don't last very long. So I'm not a real big fan of that. But if you're thinking gas mileage wise that this is going to do better because it has a 1.4 turbo, I don't know what's wrong. Maybe it's just too heavy for that engine. Maybe we had too much in the car for it. So we did have 200 pounds of tools in here, 2 people, so 600 pounds altogether, including us and all of our tools. And it averaged those kind of miles. Now we also did, on that drive, stop the car and had it idling because we were in a very hot, humid climate, and we had it idling. But I also did that with the Rogue, and it was more like 28 to 29 miles a gallon. The same drive, in the exact same roads, same drive, almost identical. I put a few less miles on it. I put on the Chevy Cruise, and I was by myself, and I did not leave the car idling for very long. Sometimes I did. I left it idling, but not for very long. Not as long as we were this time. Sometimes I had it idling for an hour. So I didn't have it idling as much. The Chevy Cruise was at 39.5 miles a gallon. So that's a pretty significant difference in fuel usage. So if you just put that into realistic numbers, you're talking about the difference of 40% better mileage. So let's just say if you used $300 a month in fuel, you would save a little over $200 a month, $200 or $300 a month, $250 a month. So that's enough to make almost the car payment itself. So if you think about it that way, it's really a better way to think about it. Percentages are what you go by fuel mileage, not by the actual miles. So if you get 30% better mileage or 40% better mileage, you just times that times your fuel cost per month, and that will tell you how much money you're really saving. So that's a really good way to calculate it. So some of the stuff I did like about the car is it does have the automatic headlights feature. And on these newer cars, it's really hard to know if you have your lights on. So sometimes when you're driving in the evening time, you'll forget to turn your lights on. You get a ticket for that once, and it basically is kind of expensive. Or you get an accident because you didn't have your headlights on, because you didn't know that they weren't on, because you can't see because the dash lights are all illuminated all the time. So that's one of the problems with the newer cars. I really like that General Motors does offer that, and I don't know if it's in all the models. Probably in this one it probably is standard. Under the hood, it has a 1.4 liter with a bit of room to work on, but not near as much room as the Cruze. The Cruze has a lot more space in it, so I would be expecting to get better service from your mechanic at the on the Chevy Cruze than you will from this what is it called, Encore. So some of the things that were really good is that the climate control system is nice in here. It does work well. It gave you a pretty even cooling throughout the car. The radio has good sound in comparison to like the Rogue. This sounds quite a bit better if you're considering that car as an option. It does have something that we found out after, which it does have a 110 outlet in the back right here. So if you can see, there's a 110 outlet, so that was kind of handy. I usually carry one of these here myself to use so that I have that all the time, but I probably didn't need it because it has it in the car. So, and I didn't know what we were going to be renting. You know, you never know exactly what model you're going to get, so it's kind of hard to know that in advance, so I didn't prepare for it. But you know, in this car, the 1.4 liter is actually, when it's loaded, is pretty much lacking in power. In the Cruze, I drove the same engine by myself, so I didn't really compare it exactly as the same as this. We had 600 pounds altogether. I'm at about 220 myself, and that was the only thing in the car besides my bag, which was maybe another 30 pounds. So probably 250 in the car. We had about 600 in here, and this thing did not feel anything close to the power that's in the Cruze with the same engine. So I don't know if it's the weight of the car or it's just tuned down or both. So it doesn't, if you think the drivetrain is going to be the same, it's really not the same in this car. The gas mileage reflects it tremendously. Some of the things it has that I don't like were another thing that I do like is I do like the cruise control setup is very nice. On the steering wheel, you can just touch it with your thumb, up and down speed. It does automatically stay on. Every time you turn the car off, you don't have to reset the cruise to turn it back on. It'll just be on all the time. You know, if you turn it on until you turn it off, then it's off all the time. So it's kind of nice when it's like that. Because in the Rogue, you have to constantly turn off and on the Cruze every time the engine stops, and you know, it's a little bit of a pain. This one, you don't have to do that, and it works very easily. The menu on stuff like that, I haven't been able to figure out anything on it for this stuff here. There is somebody told me on the Cruze, and I don't know if it's available on this, that there is a way to turn off something called an auto stop. Now, if you don't know what that is, I think that's one of their big fails in this car. I think it's just ridiculously stupid to have. How much money is it going to save you in fuel, honestly, to turn your engine off and turn it back on at a light? So what it does is, when you come up to a light and your air conditioning is at the correct temperature, it actually turns the engine off and then re-engages the starter and starts it up. And it does start up very quickly. I have to say that it does work well, but I also see the potential for a long-term problem with it, with your starter and your flywheel, possibly, you know, not lasting the whole amount of time it should for the car. So if there is a way to disable that, boy, that would be great. And comment below if you made a video on how to disable it. I'm not going to have the time it takes to actually figure out how to do that, but apparently there is a way to disable it, and I would highly recommend, if you're going to buy this car, disable that auto stop, because it will just give you problems in the long run. I'm sure the starter and the flywheel, because at first I thought it was an inductive starter, and it's not. I can hear the flywheel in the starter engage, and that on and off all the time, I could just see that being a problem. So over the long term of the car. So anyway, those are some of the things I don't like. Yeah, it was lacking in power with this size of a vehicle for some reason. In the Cruze, it was amazing. The power was great. It was basically a rocket ship, you know, I want to say. And you know, as soon as my foot hit the floor in the Cruze, man, the tires would come loose, and it would take off. This car, not so much. So it's just not even the same feel as the Cruise. So anyway, that's just my opinion on that. The cargo space and in the back. Let's take a look at that. The cargo space in the back of the car was actually not very good. You can see here that you're pretty limited with larger bags in the back of this car, even with the seats flipped down. I like to carry a folding ladder, and it barely fit in this car. I almost had to take it back and get a different car because it would barely fit in here, and it did scratch the back up a little bit that I didn't like because the way it was sitting in here. So anyway, those are just a few things that I didn't like about the car. I don't feel like it has enough cargo space. It's very short, and if you notice here, the older Rogue that I rented, a 2015, 2017 Rogues, have a more rounded back half of the car. Okay, and the rounded back half gives you another 6 or 8 inches of space back there, so you could actually put the folding ladder on edge instead of on being flatly in the seat. And that's, you know, not something that I really like about the car. Another thing that I didn't like so much about the car is I'm really not into these on-off start buttons. You know, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that and they're in a lot of the new cars, so you probably don't have much option here. The engine on, off, start, stop. You have to put your foot on the brake and start the engine by just touching the button. Well, that's run by a relay, and General Motors tends to have the weakest point in the General Motors is pretty much their electronics, and I could just see that could be a problem. And one day I could just see myself having a problem in this or something, the throttle sticks or whatever, and I wouldn't be able to turn the engine off by having a hard being able to turn off a key, because the key usually turns off all the stuff all at once. And so these on-off start buttons with a remote, I'm not really a big fan of it. I think it's a bad idea. The other thing I think about that is you could actually have your key fob and not have it in your pocket. So if you had your key fob somewhere and you came out, you want to warm your car up, you grab your key fob, you come out to your car, you warm it up, you lock the doors or whatever, you go back in the house. Some people do that. Some cities are stealing cars when they like that. Beware of that, guys. If you have your key fob and somehow you didn't have your key fob with you, you could actually drive the car, and it'll keep driving until you shut the engine off, and then you won't be able to restart it until you have the key fob in your possession again. So somebody could actually steal the car even though they don't have the key fob. So it's kind of that. I'm not, like I said, there's just too many negatives to that. I don't know why car companies are all going to that. I guess it's kind of a sales gimmick thing, and I don't really think it's a great idea. So anyway, those are just some of the things I like about the car, some things I don't like about the car. Overall, I think it's engineered pretty well. It looks like the trim pieces, the door shut tight. It seems to be more well engineered than the Rogue. The Rogue can be kind of rattly, kind of loose. It didn't really feel really good, but it did have more space. So if you were looking for that, that's available with the Rogue. And that's the only things I've rented to compare this to. So anyway, those are some of the things, the good things, some of the bad things on the car. I hope it helps you make a decision. And again, if you don't need an SUV, really consider looking at a car. They get way better miles than SUVs, and gas mileage should be a big part of your purchase. You know, you don't think that gas is going to keep going up in price. It will. It's a depleting resource. So that's what they say. I'm in the depleting resource business. You know, the guys who own the gas companies. So, you know, it's getting harder to get. You know, whatever, they have to drill places and the environmental issues with that. And you're just going to have more and more problems if you don't really consider gas mileage as being one of your top things in purchasing a car. So anyway, that's it for the review. I hope you guys like, share, and subscribe, and I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. If you own one, or you rented one, or you think it's good, or think it's bad, let me know. I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.